Gentlemen and ladies, thank you for joining us today here at TechEd. My name is John Wallace. I'm a technical director with AppSense, and my focus within the organisation is kind of twofold. Number one, I focus on our partnership and relationship from a technical perspective with Microsoft and how we can further expand or further extend the operating system and the core components of the operating system to kind of, make them evolve with technology and make them more suitable to multi-platform environments, multi-application environments, and so on. My colleague here is Dr. Benny Tritch. Some of you guys in the community may know him. I'll let you introduce yourself, Benny.
Yeah, my name is Benny Tritch, and I'm a former terminal server MVP. Now it's remote desktop services MVP, so I am on the MVP program since 2004. So I'm a sort of a veteran in this area. And I joined AppSense earlier this year, and my role is also a technical director, but in the DACH region, which is Germany, Austria, Switzerland, or Central Europe. We start our business from the DACH region to Central Europe. And like John's role, it's also twofold. One is being an evangelist, going out there and telling our customers what it's all about with our technology. And on the other side, helping our own development to figure out what must be done to adapt to different markets that are not only English speaking. So I also speak to the inside within AppSense and sitting in the same board meetings with John together.
Okay, so the title of the presentation today is One Consistent Experience Across Your PC, Laptop, and Tablet Devices. Obviously, it doesn't make sense for us to stand up here with a tablet because you're not going to see it. So when we're talking about one consistent experience, that's really where the importance is. It's not specifically on the devices itself. So what we're talking about consistent experience, we're talking about between, let's say, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, R2, terminal services, between AppV, local applications, etc. So all of the mix of technologies that really go on top of these devices that you have. So to give you an example, I own a laptop, I own a PC that sits on my desk at home, and I actually do have, I'm probably one of few, that I've actually managed to get one of the HP Slate devices that runs Windows 7.
How did you get that?
I waited a long time, okay. And yeah, what can I say? So the HP Slate device obviously runs Windows 7. It's a normal version of Windows 7, so it is no different to a laptop, it is no different to a desktop, etc. So in terms of the experience on Windows 7 and having it consistent across your different environments, it is just like going from a Windows machine to a Windows machine, and we're going to demonstrate some of that as well. Obviously, when you get into the devices, and I guess you're not allowed to say this, but the devices that have got pieces of fruit on them, things get a little bit more difficult because obviously you can't run native Windows apps and things like that. So the way you get to your desktop on these devices is using something like the Citrix receiver, the terminal services connection, and so on. So we're going to demonstrate as well having a consistent experience from a Windows-based device, whether it be a PC, laptop, etc., and then go into a terminal services session as well and show you how the personality and experience can go across these different operating systems. So we're going to do a mixture of PowerPoint, we're going to do a mixture of demonstrations as well. We're also going to show you, we're kind of going to explain how we extend what's already there. So, some of you may be thinking, well, I've got group policy and I've got roaming profiles or user state virtualization, etc., etc., etc. And sure, these tools can certainly do a lot of things for you. The problems are when you get into like mixed environments and you get into like native applications and AppV applications, you kind of get a little bit more of a complex environment there. So we're gonna go through that as well. And Benny's going to take you through some of the old stuff, well, some of the existing stuff, and kind of show you where we fit. So a couple of slides first of all. Oh, see, I told you I get mixed up. I'm pressing the R button already. So this is where we were. Let me just jump over here, Benny. This is where we were. A few years ago. This was the concept of the desktop. Literally, it was a PC that sat on top of your desktop. It looks something like this. I mean, I don't think a Windows XP machine had 2 bay drives like that, but hey, never mind. I didn't create these slides, by the way. But yeah, I mean, the concept was that this was the machine that you used day in, day out. And then what happened was, over time, the operating system evolved, and we ended up with multiple operating systems on these desktop machines. And then over time, we kind of got application infrastructures in place, so we had some App V in there. We started delivering things remotely and such. And what's kind of happened over time is we've ended up with this explosion of technology. You now access applications in a multitude of ways. You now access your information using a multitude of devices. And when it comes down to it, this is the fundamental problem. Managing these devices, managing the user experience across all of these different devices. Because as IT administrators, as IT professionals, we can sit in this room and for us it's second nature. You know, we can pick up an iPad and we can configure our email and it just works. You know, we're born to do that, if you like. We connect to a cloud service and we know where to go. We might not read the manual, but we roughly know where to click and know where to go. The average user doesn't have those skills. You know, the average user would pick up an iPad and like, how do I configure my email? I want to set a signature. How do I do that? The average user would log on to a cloud service. It's like, I need to change my time zone. I don't know how to do that. So it's important to have this consistent experience across all of these different mediums, regardless of how you're accessing it. So what we've kind of got today is we've got a load of organizations that are doing what is called simplicity exercises. I'm going to make this more simple for you. I'm going to put this in a package. I'm going to give it you out. I'm going to put this in a package. I'm going to give it out. I'm going to make it more simple. And the side effects of simplicity is complexity. And what I mean by that is the more organizations and the more vendors that you have creating solutions to make things simple, the more components that an organization uses in-house and ultimately ends up with a more complex environment. So really, using all of these different solutions, using all of these different devices and access methods may certainly, it may certainly on the surface appear to be, okay, I'm going to give the sales guy an iPad, it's going to make his life simpler. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give my admin a laptop so she can work at home and things like that. I'm going to give all of the documentation people PDAs so they can check their email at home. This seems simple for them, but when you actually bring the whole lot in to manage, it's very, very complex. Desktop virtualization, again, is another thing. It's a technology which really provides users with hosted Windows desktops that are accessible from a range of devices. Simple. I mean, how simple can that be? You're going to give someone a desktop that they can access from any single device that they have. Well, that is actually simple. The concept of you delivering one desktop, regardless of the end user device, is a simple exercise. The problem is that IT then has to manage all of those different devices. They have to control access, they have to control assets, and things like that. So it becomes very complex. And then obviously you bring into the mix application virtualization as well. So now you've got native apps, you've got virtual apps, you've got cloud apps, you've got streamed apps. All of these applications on their own are very simple. But when you bring them all together, it's very complex, and maintaining the experience across all of these different instances is very complex as well. So the main problem is that we don't do things in a big bang approach in IT. So we don't say, you know what, desktop virtualization. Desktop virtualization makes things simple. So you know what I'm going to do? On Friday, I'm going to take everyone's PC off their desk. I'm going to throw them away. I'm going to put a nice thin client on there. And on Monday, they're going to come in and log in with desktop virtualization. That doesn't happen, it's just impossible. What you do is you phase in these projects, you phase in these technologies. And when you phase in these technologies, you exist in an environment that is mixed. So when you phase in desktop virtualization as an example, there is a period where it's very feasible that a user will have a physical desktop and they will also have a virtual desktop. Some apps will be delivered from the physical desktop, some from the virtual desktop, and so on. Users operate, therefore, in a mixed technology environment for a period, but nonetheless, this period needs to be managed. Users access their applications and data using a variety of ways. So let's say, for example, you now bring in cloud storage. Well, you're not going to offload all your data on a Friday night to the cloud store, and then on a Monday, that's just the way things are going to work. There's going to be a period where things are mixed, and you're going to have to update the user's environment to ensure that they can access their data regardless of what they're doing and where they're coming from. And then, again, users need to relearn and repersonalize these environments. So you're going to take a user's desktop off them, and you're going to put them on a virtual desktop. they're going to need to repersonalize that, at least if you go from one version of the operating system to another version. And when you do that, users get dissatisfied, they get angry, and they get annoyed and things like that. Remember, our users are very simple. You know, they're used to doing things in a certain way, and when you change that, that becomes a problem. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let me just take an example of application virtualization. I'm a big fan of application virtualization, I really am. AppV is a phenomenal product. And if we were to move everyone lock, stock, in one big lump to AppV, we wouldn't have these challenges. But again, IT doesn't function like that. So this is the way that AppV works, for example. Or rather, sorry, this is the way that a normal application works. You've got Microsoft Word there. Its look and feel is written to the real registry and the real file system, which is part of the operating system. Very, very simple. When you introduce AppV into the equation, you introduce another store, if you like. You've got this virtual registry, you've got this virtual file system. That's your PKG file over there. You've got the AppV engine that is responsible for, if you like, redirecting these calls off. So when the AppV version of Microsoft Word writes to the registry or writes to the file system, these settings are redirected and they're stored not in the real registry and file system, but the virtual registry and file system. So now if you can imagine, you've got a scenario where you've got AppV applications on one machine, and then on the other machine, you've got native applications. And you've got roaming profiles set up, you've got user state virtualization set up. That's all fine, it all works. The problem is that one application is writing to the real registry or real file system. The other application is writing to the AppV virtual registry and virtual file system. You then have two separate experiences. You have two set of application settings. And when you're starting to phase in technology like application virtualization and users are running in that mixed environment, going from one environment to another where the settings are very different, that's the type of problems that cause these implementations to fail. So let me give you an example of what I've just said there, and we're just going to switch over to the demo here. So I have two versions of Adobe Reader here. One is an AppV delivered application, one is a local version, local delivered application. So I'm going to go ahead and start the AppV version. You see the application starting up down here, and we're going to go ahead and customize it. Just something simple. I'm going to go ahead and change the screen size and coordinates there. I'm going to close that down. So if I was to reopen this application, you notice my screen coordinates are in the same place. Now, that could have been dictionary location, button layouts, things like that. The difference is that when I'm on a different machine that's got Adobe Reader installed locally, you'll see that Adobe Reader looks very different. Now I'm getting the EULA to accept. If I go ahead and accept this, my screen coordinates are different. So that's okay. Let's go ahead and just do some repersonalization. It's different, I know, but now what I've got is I've got a situation where I've got two applications that actually look and feel completely different from each other. And this is a problem. This is a problem when you've got an environment with mixed technology, such as when you're phasing in new technology, when you're doing migrations and things like that. And this is really what angers and what really disrupts the user base when you're trying to implement these projects. Can we just jump back over there, Benny?
Sure.
I am going to show you how we fix this in a bit as well. So I'm going to hand over to Benny right now, and Benny's going to talk you through status quo, what we have today and how things work today.
Thank you. So what I'm doing is I'm doing many proof of concept engagements at customers. And sometimes they ask me, can you help us working on our environment? And we have established technology that we're using today that comes out of the box. And we want to see how far we can get. And I do not only do that for the work that I do at Absence, but also what I do for community. And that's all around remoting protocols and remoting environments. And on Thursday, I will do a session together, a breakout session together with Sean Bass, who is also an RDS MVP like me. And we will be comparing the different remoting protocols that are in the market out there. And that means that we have to install many, many different work environments that represent pretty much what we see at customer sites. So going beyond to what John said, it's not only about the migration, it's also about the side-by-side usage of these technologies, of different application deployment methodologies. And all the users and all the scenarios that I'm going through have different requirements. So the problem for me is setting up those environments in a way that they are reproducible. Because if I test an application in a certain setting for one remoting protocol and I do it in a different way on another platform, that's not fair. And this is why we have different technologies how to provide the application and different requirements on the user side. So things are getting really complicated. And to make it even more complicated, we have local methodologies like the PC and mobile devices on one side, and the remoting, the hosted technologies like VDI and RDS. So this also introduces a lot of challenges that we see. You will see that when I do the demo later on, how we do these tests and what the challenges are in particular. So the thing is that we need to configure the desktop or to maintain the status of the desktop from one session to the other. And I want to migrate or roam all these settings from one of the platforms to the other. And that comes with user profiles. And this is what John pointed out earlier, that there is technology, existing technology, that allows us to deal with these things. It's about the user profile. I mean, all of us get confronted with the user profile every day when we log on to a PC or a hosted desktop, because we can store it locally, we can store it as a roaming profile, but the general architecture, the general outline, the general idea of a profile is very old. So it's not modern technology. It's only there because it's sort of legacy, and it's very hard to change it. So this is the reason why we still have a profile represented in the file system and in the registry. And we have, as I said before, we have local profiles where all the information for the user settings are stored on the local machine. We have the roaming profiles where we store all these settings on a file server. And we do the configuration on a domain controller typically in Active Directory. And we have mandatory profiles where we only store one profile and we apply it to all users that log on. So all changes that the users do are discarded at log off. Now the question is, what is the best way to deal with profiles? And when you look at the chart here, you see, well, roaming profiles gives us most of the benefits that we want to have. So the personal settings are roaming. The configuration must be done by the admin. It does not happen automatically. So it's some admin overhead. The backup is no problem because it's stored on a central file server. The transfer between computers is simple as long as the OS version is the same. So the performance can be low because there's a network involved. And we load everything regarding the user profile at logon. So that is the big challenge that we have there. There's a last write wins issue. So if we start two different desktops at the same time, and the user logs off with the first desktop and made a setting, and then logs off from the second desktop, all the settings that were saved with the first desktop are overwritten. So the last writer wins. So if a user configures a new printer, a new standard printer in one of his sessions, and then terminates that session first, and then has another session up and running, it overwrites all these settings. So it's confusing for the user. You may say, this is something that does not happen to standard users. Well, if you have published applications from terminal servers, from remote desktop session hosts, then you can have the same situation. Because there is a user session running on that terminal server. However, it's not really visible that there is this session. So it depends on which applications, which published applications you terminate first. What information are written back to the profile. And so this is a big deal.
Sorry, Benny. I think it's very important as well to point out here that this is not a technology problem.
No.
I mean, this is not a technology problem. This is just a use case problem. This is because of the way people use their environment today, because of the way they use their terminal servers, the way they use their desktops has changed. And that's why we're seeing this issue now, because people are starting to use more than one session, more than one device at any one time.
That's exactly what's happening right now. It's multiple desktops per user, or multiple sessions per user, even if the real desktop is not visible. It's an invisible desktop or multiple invisible desktops that are running simultaneously. So the management is hard. That is the challenge with roaming profiles. Even if roaming profiles are there for a long time, very established technology, but we wished we had more of the other advantages as well when we look at roaming profiles. The thing is that Microsoft says we have a profile solution which is really powerful, and this is correct. If you look at the technology, it's roaming profiles, as I pointed out earlier, and we add folder redirection in order to have, well, the injection of information to particular applications when they get launched, or to have those folders that host the information of the general desktop that are loaded not from the profile storage, but that are loaded from another resource in the network. So that overcomes some of the challenges that we find with roaming profiles. And we have offline folders, which allows us to use the technology on a laptop that's not always connected. In addition, we have additional services. We have app data redirection that was introduced with Windows 7. We have IntelliMirror. We have the user profile migration tool, which is a part of the WIKE for Windows 7. So we have many of those technologies that are available, and I will show you these technologies in a minute. One thing about folder redirection, it's a great idea not storing all the information that is related to a user profile in that user profile file. Instead of that, we redirect those files to another place on the storage. However, when we have applications that are using these files when the application is launched, and the network bandwidth is not as expected, or the load on the file server is higher than expected, it can take a long time until the application starts running. So we have applications that are trying to have access to dozens or hundreds or even thousands of small files that need to be transferred over the network before the application launches. And we all know what users are doing if the application does not start within 30 seconds, 45 seconds. They start clicking. And this is a behavior that we see very often when we have those peak times, when everybody starts working, and not all the information is there immediately on the client side. And so folder redirection is a great technology, but it does not work for all environments. You can configure folder redirection at many places. Even you can hard code it in the registry, which I do not recommend, but it's possible. And we know that many of our customers are doing that. The other thing is that really is painful is that there are different user profile versions. There's version 1 and version 2. There are advantages with version 2. That's a reason why it was introduced, because it's about localization. And I told you before that I'm responsible for German-speaking market, and this is an essential piece of technology that we need for our market. So we want to make sure that the same versions of the OS is running with different language settings. And this was made sure with version 2 profiles. And we separate machine from application-specific data. So there was a good reason to introduce profiles version 2, but unfortunately, they are not compatible. So running Windows XP side by side with Windows 7 causes challenges if you're using roaming profile. The same is true for Windows Server 2003 running side by side with Server 2008 R2. So we have different profile folders. I'm going to show you these things later. And if you think it's only minor things that are different between the two profiles, I want to go through this list with you just to give you an impression. There are a lot of those differences between V1 and V2 profiles. To go further, here you see Windows 7 on the left side, Windows XP on the right side. It's different places where information is stored. It's a different way of dealing with profile information. This is a picture that I took from a white paper that was published by Microsoft, just to give you an idea that it's a complex thing that we're doing if we're talking about user profiles. And you see down there, app data local on Win 7 is the same as documents and setting, username, local settings. So it's completely different places. And this is exactly where I want to go into the demo with the profile management. So what I have here is my Hyper-V test box that I'm using to figure out those, those user environments that our customers are asking me to reproduce, and the test environment that I'm using for the session that I'm doing with Sean. Now, the thing is that if I want to look at the profile storage, so we're going to take a look at the standard profile. This is an administrator in his profile. And you see, there's not much that you can see if you do not allow to see the hidden files and the protected files. If I do that, you see, wow, the profile is a lot larger than you may have expected. So there are many hidden files. And you see there are interesting files you see here with this sign, with this symbol here. And the question is, what happens if I click that? I cannot go there. This is Explorer that does not allow me to do that. If I start a standard application doing the same thing, so I start an alternative file manager that shows you what happens if I go there. I'm in the same profile here. So if I zoom into it, it's users, administrator. Now if I go back and I just double click one of these links, what you see here, it jumps to a completely different place. So what the OS does here, it's sort of lying. It pretends that the data is still at a place where it used to be, but in fact it's not. Unfortunately, not all applications are good enough, are smart enough to be able to deal with that. So we have things that are not really compatible. If you look at an environment that really uses several machines, several versions of the OS, I set that up here in a test environment. So I have my management server here, I have my user, and this user has a roaming profile. This roaming profile is configured here. It is redirected to a share in the home drive. It's a home drive that the user is assigned to. And if I really do that, I can use my Windows XP box and log on to that. It's a nice tool here. It's a free download from Microsoft. I want to recommend it to you. You can build beautiful environments with that. So what happens here, I started Windows XP, and just like John did, I can start an application, Notepad. If I wanted to configure this application so that the information roams, I want this information to roam with me when I go to Windows 7. So I close the app. I just log off here. I'm sure that I want to log off. And as soon as the profile is written back to the file system, which happens on logon, so I have to wait a little bit, saves my settings. Now we are done. Now I go to Win 7. Wait for the logon to happen. Now we're doing the same thing. And you see, it's a different configuration. We have the status bar here, which we didn't have before. So the information didn't roam, even if we had roaming profiles. So why is that? If you look at the management server, go to the file system, you see here, we have user1 and user2.v2. So I didn't configure that. It happened automatically. So if I go to these different folders, I find the different folder structure, exactly the folder structure that I was showing you earlier. Now you can imagine that these things are not very handy if you want to run different test scenarios, different platforms simultaneously. Because if you have an old terminal server environment which gives your users access to some applications in a seamless way, but on the other side you already migrated to a Win 7 desktop where you inject those applications, it's two different profile concepts, and they're not compatible. And this is exactly where it gets really confusing for the user. Now, if we go back and take a look at how you can see these things in the file system, which I showed you with my little tool, with the little alternative file manager, what you can also do, you can do it on the command line. You can check out what you can see in the user profile. So you see these junction points, which in fact are, in the Unix world, you would call them symbolic links. So this is how this all is organized. So what does Microsoft provide in order to migrate from one environment to the other? Let's go back to another virtual machine. That's a Win 7 machine. On this one, I installed the Windows IKE, the automated installation toolkit.
Yep.
And with this automated installation toolkit, we have the user state migration toolkit. So inside that one, we have an application that is called Scan State. This application allows us to scan or to extract the profile from a Windows XP machine, for example. And we have a load state tool that also comes with the toolkit that allows us to inject what we have done into a Windows 7 machine. But if you just look at the options that are offered through this tool, it becomes very clear. It's extremely powerful, but it can also be very painful to use it. And it's a one-way street. So you can migrate from Windows XP to Windows 7, but there's no way back, which means you do the migration once, and you have to be done. If your user decides, hey, I'm going to go to another office where they still have Windows XP, it will not be possible for the user to use the profile settings that he stored. And this is what John also said, which is a situation that we see in many existing environments, that we cannot afford migrating to the new OS versions on all platforms at the same time. So the last thing that I wanted to show you is where do we configure policies? Because what we also want to do is not only preserve the information what the user leaves when he logs out, we also want to make sure that he gets certain information injected while he logs in that we want to control as administrators. And this is done through group policy. As I said before, we have this folder redirection that we can configure through group policy. But we also have things, and here are all the different folders that you can redirect through Active Directory. The other thing, what we can do is personalization. So again, you see the setup of your desktop can be configured through these settings here. And we also can configure the offline files, another part of the user state management provided by Microsoft. So it's all there. It's very powerful, as I said, but it's got some of these limitations that we find when we're looking at customer environments. So in order for me to fulfill what I wanted to do when doing some of the tests that we do for the protocol comparison, these are tests like that. So we just start testing one of the 3D applications, and all the settings that are assigned to this application, I want to be able to inject it as soon as I start the application. And this is where I want to hand it over back to John, because my requirement is very clear. I need cross-platform. I need injection of the setting for each individual application. And I want to have support for all of the virtualization platforms that are provided by Microsoft. Started with Hyper-V, Virtual PC, AppV, all these virtualization technology must be supported, because this is what our customers are asking me to help them to do, plus support all the existing physical platforms that they still have. Not everybody migrates to virtual platforms immediately. So this is what I want to have. And now I want to switch back to...
Awesome.
This here.
Yep,
so this is how I'm challenging you. Can you fulfill?
Awesome. Thanks, Benny.
Wait. We have also one of these things that profiles are getting bigger and bigger. That is one of the big things that I also want to point out. You have to figure out how that works and how to overcome that we only store the profiles in one big bucket, because there are other technologies out there. How we could solve that? We could separate the profiles, segment the profiles, looking at all the individual applications, or we could do something that is called profile streaming, where we inject the creation of the profiles and the loading of the profile process so that we can manage it in a better way. And this is exactly where I want to give it to you and
awesome. Thanks,
see
Benny.
how that can be done.
So now I'm going to introduce a concept to you known as user virtualization. Virtualization is I'm going to say a technology, but it's not really a technology, because virtualization can apply to different things. For example, if we look at the life cycle of virtualization, the first thing we did was we virtualized the hardware. It made sense. We've now got these huge boxes that are massively underutilized. So you know what? What we're going to do is we're going to put multiple workloads, we're going to put multiple machines on each one of these big, huge boxes. So we virtualized the hardware. That made perfect sense to everyone. Sure, when the first companies in this space first came out with it, we're like, yeah, you're crazy, it's never going to take off. But hey, now here we are, and I think a lot of the server loads today, they all run on hypervisors and things like that. So hardware virtualization is kind of it makes sense. I mean, it's just one of those things that's got to be done. And then what we did was we introduced application virtualization. You know, gone are the days when you take an MSI package and you go next, finish, or you take a .exe, for example, that's got its own custom setup and things like that. It doesn't make sense anymore. Why? Because we've got more and more machines. So the idea of an administrator going round to each one and installing the same application on each one, it just doesn't make sense. So what we did was we virtualized the application. So we take an application now, we put it into a virtual container, and we can push that out en masse. It's really very, very simple. So we've ended up with two layers. We've got a hardware virtualization layer, and we've got an application virtualization layer. Well, the next logical step is the user. I mean, your user is the final component of the desktop. Your user is made up of your personalization, your data, your user-installed applications. If you go and install Flash, Silverlight, things like that, well, that's a user-installed application. And there's a load of other stuff as well that's associated with the user. Well, again, it doesn't make sense for that user element, that user component, to be tied to that machine or that operating system anymore. So user virtualization is about taking that layer and completely abstracting it from the stack. So you now have your hardware virtualization layer, your application virtualization layer, and now you have your user virtualization layer. And in true virtualization form, you can take this bottom layer and you can mix and match the application layer. You might deliver your apps using AppV, then you might deliver your apps using Citrix, you might have some local installed apps, but you can mix and match them.
Does that mean you can extract all the information that I just showed you from the system?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. This is exactly what I want.
So then you take your user layer, same concept. You mix and match all of these different environments. So if you're delivering Windows XP delivered on a hypervisor, and then you're delivering Windows 7 on a native machine, you can mix and match that user layer. You should be able to take that user layer and put it anywhere you want. So let's explore this in more detail. So what is user virtualization? Well, the first thing I want to point out is user virtualization is a technology layer, just like desktop virtualization. And it allows a consistent user experience to be portable, regardless of what device you're using. When I say technology layer, I want to be very specific. It's not a product. Okay? This is not a Microsoft Word product, or this is not a roaming profile product. It's a technology layer. It's a category, if you like. It encompasses many elements of the user experience, including the personalization, including the data, including the user applications. And in fact, user state virtualization is a form of user virtualization. It makes up one part of it, which is the personalization aspect. And again, it applies to a desktop stack regardless of what that desktop stack is comprised of. So it kind of looks something like this. You have your hardware virtualization layer, you have your application virtualization layer. This is virtual apps, streamed apps, cloud apps. Then you have your user virtualization layer, and this is where your user state, your user data, your user apps are. It's very, very important as well you have policy on these layers. You need to be able to control where that data can go, what the user sees, what the user can do, what the user can install, etc., etc., etc. So policy is still a very important aspect of the user virtualization layer, just as it is with the application layer as well. Obviously, we've got some enterprise management in there, so be that the products, the user virtualization product that you're using, their management, or something like System Center or other management tools that are out there. It's important that you can manage all of these layers as well. So what's the difference between user virtualization and user state virtualization? One letter, is it? No, I'm kidding. Basically, USV, user state virtualization, is a Windows component. Okay, so this is a piece of software, it's a piece of code, just like DFS or anything like that, that allows a user personality to roam between different machines. As Benny pointed out, it's important that those machines are the same operating system. USV is a combination of roaming profiles and folder redirection. It's mature technology. Benny already said this. It's mature technology. It's been in the operating system for a long time. It works. In a lot of instances, it works. And it serves a distinct purpose. It roams user settings between machines. So, again, what's the difference? Well, remember, UV is a technology, so it's a technology category, whereas USV is a component, it's a tool. So USV is actually fits in the UV category. UV has a broad reach, and as such, it has a big set of requirements. Wow. Kind of need some on-hold music so I can take a drink. Whereas USV, it has a narrow set of requirements. Its purpose is to fulfill a specific task. And again, USV is Microsoft OS specific. So it's not going to apply to other operating systems. It's not going to apply to other platforms and things like that. Okay. So, what is AppSense user virtualization? So the reason I'm going through all these, and I appreciate these might just be mind-numbing things, but it's really important that we get the terminology right, so you understand that when people are talking about user virtualization, what it actually is. So AppSense provides user virtualization technology. Just like Oracle provides database technology and Salesforce provides CRM technology. Are we the only company that provides user virtualization technology? No, absolutely not. There are others out there that will do this for you. Not as good, but they'll do it for you. But the key part I want to make, the key point I want to make, is that user virtualization is a layer as opposed to an individual alternative to, say, roaming profiles, for example. And AppSense UV technology consists of multiple capabilities, including extensions to user state virtualization, so including ones that extend the Windows existing offerings. And we're going to demonstrate some of these to you as well. Okay, so let's switch over to my demo here. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to expand on the demo that I did before, which is the two versions of the application, one native, one physical. I'm going to show you, again, the same sort of experiment, but I'm going to show you the application sharing personalization. So I'm going to use Microsoft Word for this. We can do it on the same machine, so I'm going to use Microsoft Word on Windows 7. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to start Microsoft Word. So this is a locally installed application. It's installed locally on the image. I'm going to go ahead and customize it. So let's say Word Options. I'm going to change this to black. And I'm going to go ahead and make the window size different. So very simple. I'm going to close that down. I'm now going to go ahead and open an AppV version of Microsoft Word. So you'll see AppV starting down here. And what you're going to notice is once this application is streamed in and delivered, the personalization looks the same. So we haven't got the issue that we had with the Adobe Reader product before. Let me go ahead and change this again. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move it over here. Oops. Let me make it a little bit bigger so I can grab the toolbar. I'm going to move it over here, close this down. I'm now going to start the local version of Microsoft Word again. And what you're going to see is you're going to see that personalization has now come from the virtual one to the physical one. Now, just in case anyone's thinking about this, by the way, the reason that doesn't work on Adobe Reader is I've told the agent not to manage Adobe Reader. I've specifically excluded Adobe Reader from management so I can do the demo I did before.
So you fulfill the first of my requirements. Do that on application launch so I can configure individual applications.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
So let's explain how this works, Benny. Let's just switch back over to the slides again, and I'm kind of going to explain
Absolutely.
what's going on here as well. Okay, so if we go back to the diagram that we had up before, obviously you've got the application on the left, which is running inside the AppV bubble, and you've got the application on the right, which is installed locally. They're both right into different places. Well, when we bring user virtualization into the aspect, we introduce a layer that sits on top of everything that's underneath. So this layer sits above the AppV agent, this layer sits above the Windows profile, etc., etc. And what this layer can do is actually synchronize the personalities of the application. So it can synchronize the personality of the AppV delivered application, as well as synchronizing the personality of the local application to ensure that they are the same. And in essence, the way it does this is very similar to AppV. It virtualizes the registry and it virtualizes the file system, and it abstracts that away. So in this environment, you actually don't have any information in the PKG file, but you also don't have any information in the user profile as well. That information is abstracted, it's virtualized away from the operating system, and therefore you can take that specific information and you can layer it onto different stacks as you wish. Okay, let me show you this going across platform as well. Oh. So Benny spoke about migration before and the difficulties of going from one platform to another. Your migration is one way, etc. I personally think migration is a thing of the past. I really do. I mean, migration for me is one way. Hey, I migrated from England to America. I don't intend going back, but it's one way. And again, the operating system is the same. You migrate from one operating system to another. You don't intend to go back, but hey, who knows what happens? One day you might need to. In terms of testing, in terms of the migration internally, you might run on Windows 7 and find an application that doesn't work. You might all of a sudden need to go back to Windows XP. So rather than migrate, what we prefer to do is to abstract this user layer and allow it to port on any machine that you want. So let me go ahead and do my Microsoft Word example again. So I'm going to go ahead and start Microsoft Word as a native application. We've already customized it. Let's just do this one more time. This time I'm going to go for the silver look and feel. And I'm going to jump this time onto the Windows XP machine. I'm going to start Microsoft Word over here. And you're going to see that personalization, that silver look and feel, has gone from Windows 7 to Windows XP. So I went the reverse of the migration. Let's go the other way as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, close that down, jump back over here. I'm going to start Microsoft Word again over here. In fact, you know what? We'll even start Microsoft Word as an AppV app this time, just to show you cross-app again as well. So there we've gone from XP to Windows 7 and also a cross-app virtualization as well. And we've got that. We've got
exactly what I need.
Now, here's the challenge though, right? Which is, well, when you deliver a desktop out to a device that doesn't run a Windows operating system, the only way to do that is to use some form of terminal services technology, something like that. So it's important that we can also extend our personalization from a desktop operating system to a server operating system as well. So let me bring up one of them as well. So right down here, I have a Windows Server 2003 R2 instance. This is just delivered using Citrix. I'm going to go ahead and start Microsoft Word on this desktop as well. And you're going to see that silver look and feel has come with me. Let me do this one more time. I'm going to change the look and feel again. I'm going to jump back to...
So that was the third requirement, supporting all the different virtualization technologies that are out there.
Absolutely. So let me jump back to the XP machine, start Microsoft Word again. And what we've done there is we've gone from a Windows Server machine now to a Windows XP machine as well.
Same works for 32-bit to 64-bit, I guess?
Absolutely, yeah. In essence, what we're doing here is we're abstracting the individual elements of the application. I don't know if you noticed there was no logoffs involved there. So we're not writing the entire profile back at logoff. What we're doing is we're capturing the specific settings for an application and we're storing them and we're allowing that to roam as an individual virtualized layer. Can we jump back to the PowerPoint there, Benny? Okay. I'm reversing again, sorry. Okay. So, just to summarize here, what we've kind of got now is we've kind of got our user, we've got our corporate user, This guy exists today, and he uses some standard applications. He uses SAP, he uses Word, Excel. We've got some Oracle in there, etc. And he uses these from his desktop. Tomorrow is going to be very, very different. Tomorrow's world is going to be a very, very different experience. Now you've got this same user that's accessing things from a PDA. He's accessing YouTube. He's accessing WebEx, things like that. You've got the same user that's accessing things from a Slate device or from a tablet device. He also uses a different operating system at home. He uses a different type of computer in a different office, etc. So you're going to end up with a massively complex environment. And it's essential that to this nice, simple user, that you deliver a consistent experience to this user all of the time. Really, you've got this user that's kind of got an evolution now. You know, his settings, his experience has to evolve with him regardless of the device that he's actually going onto. So the user's really made up of all of these different pieces. You know, you've got some rights there, you've got some policy there, you've got some data there, applications, etc., etc., etc. And what we need to do is we need to really bring all of these into this evolution of technology. So as such, that when the user goes onto different devices and different delivery mechanisms, that experience is with them.
So that means that we, can you go back to that picture? So that means that right now we were concentrating on the personalization part, and we were looking, well, at some aspects of the policies, but it goes much further. Now, what we find out at customers when we are talking to them is that they also want to see the data managed in such an environment. They think that it's important that we care for the data when looking at the user personality. And looking at the applications, how applications behave, the rights management is another thing that we need to look at. So what we're looking at, the user state migration toolkit on one side and the user state virtualization provided by Microsoft, it's powerful technology which only focuses on the personalization, which is great technology, as I said before. We're using it since many years, and there are many people out there who are experts in that and make a living of integrating this technology in live environments. However, we see that we need to go further. So that is a very, very critical message. And the other thing that we figured is that migrating to Windows 7 may still work the traditional way. But if you want to go further and introduce your virtualization technologies later, it's a good idea to virtualize the user first. Because if you do that during your traditional Windows 7 migration project, it makes your life a lot easier as soon as you start migrating to the virtualized platform, to VDI environments, to remote desktop session host environments. So the environments that I showed you during my demo, because they were all virtual. And most of the remoting protocol tests that we do, as the name indicates, are running on server platforms. There are one-on-one technologies that are using real workstations to remote into them, but this is only for high-end graphics workstations. Most of the scenarios that we see is remoting into some sort of a server platform, virtualization, hardware virtualization platform, and running Win 7 on those, or running in an RDS environment, side by side with the physical environments. And as soon as you start doing that, together with the Win 7 migration, things are getting really complicated without virtualizing the user first.
All right, guys. I want to say thanks for your time today. I definitely appreciate your attention. If you do have any questions, myself, Benny, will be around. We're more than happy to answer them. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You'll find us at the booth. It's 701. So come down to the show floor, and we will be there and happy to show you our product. And now, if you have questions, just come back.